May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, hey, Ascension. Miss y'all. Thank you. It was so nice to be able to even come in the front door. One of the many things that I admire and cherish about the Ascension family is that it's chock full of cultural historians, very learned cultural historians. How many of you in your research and study have come across an archaic piece of televised history called The Honeymooners? You must have read about it, because I'm sure no one here is old enough to have seen it in live broadcast. For those of you who haven't run across it, The Honeymooners was a sitcom starring Jackie Gleason as Ralph Cramden. What was Ralph Cramden's job? He was a bus driver, that's right. Well, we're going to switch places with Ralph just for a shift. Now, Ralph's route has 4 regularly scheduled stops. As the bus leaves the station, there are already 2 passengers on board. At the first regularly scheduled stop, 1 passenger boards the bus and 1 passenger gets off. At the second stop, two passengers get off the bus. When they pull into the station, when we pull into the station, the 4th regularly scheduled stop, how many people are on the bus? I got some ones in here. I got some ones. I got a 3 over there. It's actually 2. There's the 1 passenger that's left after all those on and offs, and the driver. We often get so caught up with all the details that we forget the beginning of the story. Remember, we were switching places with Ralph, who is the bus driver. And along with the 1 remaining passenger, the driver is also one of the people on the bus. See, that's what usually happens to me when I read this passage from Matthew. I forget the beginning of the story. I get so busy playing King Solomon, who's right, who's wrong, what's fair, what's just, and get caught up in the details of who got where, when, and whether or not that has bearing on what the landowner decides to bestow on each of them. They're his resources. I get so caught up in those details that I forget where I was supposed to be going when this bus ride started. Harry, would you please, loud and clear, read the first 8 words of today's gospel lesson?
Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like."
Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like." Whoa. Wait. That doesn't have anything to do with payroll or the timesheets you turned in or whether or not you got to sleep in the morning and show up late. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like. So you're telling me that this story never was about who showed up looking for work, when they got hired, how much they were paid, nor how they felt about it compared to how much someone else was paid. The parable isn't really about any of those things. No, it isn't. Like all of them, Jesus' parables are about something much bigger than the characters in the play or what happens in their scripted lives. Jesus, once again, is trying to give us an understanding of what God and God's kingdom is. Christ is trying to feed our understanding with concepts and words that will compute in our tiny little brains and give us the closest idea that we're able to comprehend and digest. Of course, we cannot ever fully understand the true magnitude of God. God is so huge, so far outside our realm of relatability that we can't grasp the full measure of love and grace that is gifted to us. What this little parable illustrates is that God's full measure of grace is there for each and every one of us. Whether we became mature in our faith and our walk with Christ 80 years ago, or if we just got a clue on how to follow God's great commandments day before yesterday. The divine love and grace is poured out in full measure even to those who won't show up until tomorrow. You got to remember that the obedient sheep of the herd that did not wander off, but stayed close to the shepherd, didn't get more of his love and care than the misbehaving one that was lost for a time but was found and brought home, who came back into the fold and followed the shepherd thereon. The abundance of God's grace goes far beyond the concept of our being able to earn our fair share. However, don't miss the fact of the story that shows us that though the landowner was gracious and generous enough to give each worker the same wage regardless of the time spent, make note that he did not bestow that largesse upon anyone who did not come to him and do the work. He did not give a day's wage to those still standing around near the end of the day just because they were there. Even though it was late in the day, those he hired last came and labored in good faith at the work he gave them to do. This grace, though not a reward or something we can earn, is also not a gimme. We've been told clearly that we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. This is the work we're given to do. Jesus speaks to us in parables because it's often the only way that we can manage to see a scale model sketch of the life eternal. Here's another little illustration. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Have you ever tried to follow one bird with your eyes? Just the one bird, not a flock, not one enclosed in a zoo or a cage, not one who's sitting pretty posing for the next Audubon Society picture, but a plain, small, brown bird just out in the open. You've got to be seriously quick. You can't blink because it'll be gone, and if it's not gone, you can't be sure it's the same bird. Was there a freckle on that feather before? Don't for a second in this exercise look away to attempt to focus on something else. All bets are off at that point. Well, God's got an eye on that bird, and that bird, and that bird, and you, and you, and you, and you, and me, and tracking all of it. How's that for huge? Don't worry about what someone else receives in grace. They're not getting a piece of your share. They're not showing you that you have not gotten enough for what you've put in. God's grace is abundant beyond comprehension and so much more than sufficient for all of us. When you get worried and you get in the weeds with the details, Go back to the beginning of the story. Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like. Amen.